guy says, this man from the synagogue, if they don't take him for free, I am giving you my word, I will pay his tuition and I will get him into whatever school you want. So the uncle still thought it was crazy and said, this is never going to happen. And nobody's taking you for free. And this guy doesn't know you from Adam. And he's not going to pay your tuition. And you're crazy. Just go to this school that I arranged. And I spent 2 weeks getting him in. This coming Thursday is the conclusion of these 3 weeks. This is the 9th of Av. This is a very significant fast that begins starting from Wednesday night and then Thursday. It's a very severe fast. And as we've said these past weeks, what we focus on during these 3 weeks, and of course, especially in these last final 9-day stretch, is increasing love among Jews, increasing Ahavas Yisrael, love for a Jew, brotherly love. And we said it's not to rectify because the destruction of the Second Temple over 1900 years ago, because the Lubavitcher Rebbe said finally, after over 1900 years, we did rectify that. But it's to live redemption, especially now, and to bring redemption. So I wanted to spend this last class of these 3 classes on, practically speaking, working on our love for other Jews. I want to start by sharing a story of a person I don't know intimately, but he was a friend of my father's, he's a friend of my uncle's, his wife is a friend of my aunt's. I have a connection. And this story I felt was so saturated with this idea of just free love for another Jew. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this story. So much we can learn and then try to practically work on our love for others, because that's really what we're doing now. So this story is with a man who lives currently in Montreal. His name is Ganevish, Rabbi Ganevish, an elderly person. And he was actually a baby during the Holocaust. He was 6 months old when the Holocaust began. He lived in the eastern side of Poland. And thanks to the Germans at that point, when Germany and Russia were still working together, and the eastern half of Poland was officially Russia's before Germany came and then deported all of those people to the concentration camps. But at this point, Russia controls it. Germany's around too. They're good friends. And Russia said, we need 100,000 workers to cut down trees for us in Siberia. No problem, Germany says, take the Jews. So they start grabbing Jews. The Germans, helping the Russians, are grabbing Jews and throwing them in these cattle cars, not going to the concentration camps. That's before the concentration camps, going to Siberia to chop trees down for the Russians. And in this way, they make the story brief. Rabbi Ganevish's father, 2 uncles, mother, grandmother, and himself as a 6-month baby all wound up in the forests of Siberia. During the war, his mother passed away, and also 2 cousins, 2 boys that had also been caught in the same net. And when the war is over, his grandmother's alive, who was taking care of him, and his father and 2 uncles. They come back to Poland and eventually get to Israel. Before they got to Israel, his grandmother passed. He is now in Israel with his father. His father was penniless. His father found work, building roads, making pennies. There's some elementary school that the boy is able to go to, the government's paying. Once he finishes that level of his education, now he's about 10 years old, and now his father has a problem. The father's very religious. The father wants him to go on to yeshiva, to a religious school. But in those days, if you were completely orphaned, the government paid. But since he, thank God, had a parent, he had his father, the government didn't pay. And since the government was paying and his father had no money, the father went to 3 different schools and nobody would take his son without tuition. He says, I don't have it. So the father was speaking to his brother, who lives in another city in Israel, in Petach Tikva. His uncle in Petach Tikva was also a very religious person, also very penniless. He arranged with a local school that was religious, but very little religious, to take the boy for free. After 2 weeks of talking to the school and pleading the case, this is a Holocaust survivor, now a whole sob story, which is unfortunately very true. The school agreed to take the boy for free, which is very kind. So the father was okay, thank God, at least we got you into a school. So he goes with his 10-year-old son, and they come to his brother. Sunday, we're going to go and register in this school. So God runs the world. And that Friday night, it was a tremendous rainstorm. And his uncle tells his father, We can't walk to synagogue. We'll get drenched. It's a few blocks away. No way. We're just going to pray at home. And the father said, pray at home? We're supposed to pray with the synagogue. There's no synagogue closer than 3 blocks away? And he said, well, there's a synagogue 3 houses down the block. But I don't know. It says Chabad. I don't know what Chabad is. Maybe it's Jews from Yemen. Or they don't pray like us. So let's just pray at home. And the father was like, what are you talking about? Well, who cares if they're from Yemen? Prayer is prayer. We'll manage. Let's go. So he convinced his brother. And they go to this synagogue 3 houses down instead of 3 blocks. They run, get to the synagogue. So they come in, pray the Friday night services, and they start talking with some friendly guy in the synagogue. And he says, oh, why are you here? He said, I came with my 10-year-old son to register him at such and such a school, the school he was going to go to on Sunday. And the man's thinking, the man didn't want to say anything rude. He said, it's a very good school, but I don't think it's really for your time. Why are you sending him there? And he said, I have no choice. I have no money. I can't pay a tuition, and no other school will take him. And the man said, we'll get him into a Chabad school for free. By now they knew that Chabad meant religious, closer to them. I will get him to a Chabad school for free. Sunday, you're going to go to Lud, and there's a Chabad school there, and they will take your son for free. And okay, this is amazing. And they go home. The uncle says, you are crazy. No school's going to take him for free. What are you talking about? I spent 2 weeks to get him into this school. Barely after 2 weeks of begging and pleading, you're just going to saunter into a school in Lud. You don't know anyone. And the next day, there was no rain. And they went to the uncle's synagogue. And then at the end of the Shabbos for Mincha Ma'ariv, the prayers in the afternoon and the evening, the father said, let's go back to that Chabad synagogue. And the uncle said, no, we're not going. And why do you want to go? And nobody's going to take your son for free. And that's like fantasies. And the father goes, and he convinces his brother to go. And they come with the son, and they pray the afternoon service, the evening service. And then that same friendly man comes over. Oh, I'm so glad you came. Here, I'm writing you a letter. You're going to go tomorrow from Petach Tikva. You're going to take a train to get to Lud. Here's where the school is. You're going to present my letter. They will take your son for free. And the uncle started arguing with him. He said, you don't understand what you're doing. There's no way they're going to take him for free. What's going to happen is he's going to go there, not where he's supposed to go Sunday morning. So by the time he comes back and goes to that other school, the other school will be, what are you doing here? You're supposed to come here Sunday morning, and we're going to lose that spot, and we're going to lose everything. The man says, they will take him for free. The guy says, nobody takes anyone for free. They're not going to take him for free. The guy says, this man from the synagogue, if they don't take him for free, I am giving you my word. I will pay his tuition, and I will get him into whatever school you want. So the uncle still thought it was crazy and said, this is never going to happen. And nobody's taking you for free. And this guy doesn't know you from Adam. And he's not going to pay your tuition. And you're crazy. Just go to this school that I arranged. And I spent 2 weeks getting him in. But the father felt really bad because he knew that school was not so religious. It wasn't on their level of religious. And he was really torn because he understood by now what Chabad meant. And he understood it would be a really religious school, which is what he wanted for his son. So the next morning, he gambled, and he went with his son to this city in Israel called Lud. And they get out of the train, and right by the train, there's this school. And they go, and before you get in, there's a secretary sitting there by the door. And the man says, yes, what are you here for? And he said, I'm here to register my son. And here's a letter. And he gives the letter that this man gave him. And the man reads the letter, and he says, we're so happy to have another boy in school. Come, you can come in. And the father was shocked because the father did not expect that this was really going to happen. It seemed like a dream. And the father, even though he did travel to the city, he said, I didn't bring any of my son's stuff. I didn't even bother. I came, but you believe, you don't believe what's all this stuff. This is a poor boy that has nothing, but his clothing is behind. He said, don't worry. He calls to some woman that works there. She says, oh, I have clothing for you. Here's a bag. Here's your weekday clothes. Here's your Shabbos clothes. On Friday, give me the weekday clothes. I'll wash it for Sunday. On Sunday, give me your Shabbos clothes. I'll wash it for next Shabbos. And that was it. He was taken in. He was embraced. No tuition, no money, no nothing. He's a boy. They give him clothes. They give him food. They give him pocket money. Everyone was very poor, but they just embraced him as another child. And he told story after story, his stories, his truth, his life. And it was such a sense of, wow, just love. Just what people do for each other. They didn't know him. They didn't know his father. They have no obligation to him. There was no thought of connections or someone's going to help us later, so it's worth it to help this child. It was just, here's a child. Here's a child that wants to be in this school. We want to take him in. And his life continues, and he eventually gets to America because his father remarries, so he couldn't really live in his father's tiny little shack with a new wife. And in those days, they would put in the newspaper names searching for survivors. His mother's sister, who survived Auschwitz and was in New York, saw their name, reached out to them, and eventually he went to live with his aunt and uncle. And again, just like each step along the way, he's in New York and also trying to find a school, and eventually goes to the Chabad school in New York. And also, he just comes. They know nothing from him. This time he brought a letter from the school in Israel. And that's it. They take him in. They embrace him. They find a place from the dorm. They take him into the school. They never think of charging tuition. It doesn't even come up. Then it's going to be many details in the story. When he turned 18, the Israeli government said, okay, now you got to come back home. Until now, you were a student in America, fine, but I have to come back home. You have to serve in the army. And he reaches out to his father, and his father's like, I'd love for you to come, but you can't come. It's not going to work in my house now, unfortunately. I wished you could, but it's not going to work. And the Israeli government is saying, you have to come. If you don't come, we're not renewing your passport, and then they're going to kick you out of America. And he was in this quandary, and he asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, speak to the administration in the school. And he speaks to a person in the administration, Rabbi Jacobson, and Rabbi Jacobson, oh, I got to get this kid out of America. Because in America, they're going to kick him out. They know he exists. He's legal enough that they know about him. And if Israel doesn't renew his passport, America is going to kick him out. He's going to have a real problem. So let me get him to Canada. Because in Canada, nobody knows about him. So he can live there undetected, under the radar, off the grid. So he reaches out to someone in Canada. And that person writes him this whole long letter in English. The boy couldn't read a word of English. Whole long letter in English. Oh, you're my long lost half brother. And I just found out you survived the war. And I'd love to meet you. This will be the most meaningful thing in my life. But I can't come to America because I have a child that's not well, that needs my care. But please come and visit me in Montreal. And the administration of the school, Rabbi Jacobson, gives this boy, this 18-year-old, this letter. And he says, okay, but how am I supposed to get to Canada? I can't cross the border. I don't have any paperwork. My passport expired. I'm not legal. I have no way of getting there. And Rabbi Jacobson goes, don't worry, you'll figure it out. He has a friend that he knew from Israel who is learning in like this Chabad school in Montreal. He sees him in New York and he says, you're going back to Canada? He says, yeah. He says, I want to go too, but I have no way of crossing the border. I'm not legal. He said, come with me. They'll let you cross or they won't. If they won't, you stay there. If they do, you cross. What difference does it make? He says, okay. So that was a plan. They come to the crossing. His friend is sleeping away. It's hours, the middle of the night. He can't sleep. He's terrified because he has no legal papers. And he knows what they do. They come, they check everyone's paper. And anyone not legal, they take off. And he had no legal paper. He had an expired Israeli passport and this letter from his officially long-lost half-brother. So the inspectors come on and they go to each person. Each person has to give the papers. And he sees people that are legal, they leave on, and people that are not legal, they take off. And he knows he's not legal. They first go to his friend sitting next to him who woke up and gave his very legal paperwork. Fine. And then they ask him for his papers. He doesn't have any papers. He has an expired Israeli passport and this letter. He gives it to the guy. The guy opens it up and he sees the letter. He opens the letter. He reads the letter. He looks at him. He gives him back his paperwork and he said, have a nice trip. So that's how he got into Canada. They come to Montreal, to the Chabad school there where he's illegal, off the grid, no paperwork. The school knows nothing about him. And they're like, okay, come tomorrow just so we organize ourselves to get a bed for you somewhere. The friend that he came with said, come with me to my aunt and uncle. That's where I sleep and there's plenty of room. Okay. So he comes into the apartment, looks like a little apartment, plenty of room. The friend says, yeah, there's plenty of room. Eat here, sleep. Here's this bed. He said, whose bed is it? He said, it's normally mine, but I'm going to sleep in the next room. So you could be in this bed. He says, okay, fine. He's exhausted. He goes to sleep. When he wakes up in the morning, he sees his friend on the floor next to him. So he understood that there was no other bedroom. There was no other bed. And so it continued, and many other stories saturated with people doing whatever they could to help. He's another Jew. A beautiful story with so many examples of what it means to really be there for somebody else, another Jew in need. The more details you hear, the more just so much love, so much kindness, so much generosity. How beautiful how we can and should behave both to the people we don't know and to the people we do know. So at this point, what do you view as your blockages to having this type of love? What's preventing you, or preventing us, or preventing people from this free, loving, generous, kind, compassionate love for another Jew. Any thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts.
Ava.
I think that's our complexes, our own shortcomings. We know that what makes us angry or annoyed with other people when we see something that it's in ourselves, like a mirror, right? Not being sure of ourselves, being afraid that people act negatively to us, people might hurt us emotionally. Right? So all those things, basically our lack of confidence, lack of believing in ourselves, I think along those lines, that's what probably stopping us from being 100% giving and loving to other people. I think people who don't have those complexes themselves, they're much more open in loving and giving to other people.
Okay, those are really deep reasons on why it could be hard to love. You're saying it reflects back to yourself, to your own insecurities, fears, and also looking at other people's shortcomings that really are mirroring your own and therefore getting you upset. There's a lot of deep things we have to work on to really overcome them. Anyone else before we try to tackle some of these things Chava raised?
I agree 100%, but also I think that we were raised in different society, different mentality, the values that we were exposed in our childhood and later on, they were survival mode. We had to survive, not to think about other people, because it was like foreign ideas for us to invest into community, to help, to love another Jew. It was all foreign. And I'm talking about maybe my experience, but for all of us who were raised in the Soviet Union, it was, again, was different mentality. You had to survive.
That's so interesting because it's such a Jewish thing to care for other people. And it's pretty intense to think that the Soviet Union managed to eradicate that natural Jewish feeling. You think of this man's story, any penny, and none of the people that were helping him had pennies either. Definitely not in Israel.
They were religious. They were aware of the values, right? Jewish values, to help another Jew, to be kind and compassionate. But we were not.
There was education that was making you sensitive that, yes, you have nothing, but you have nothing, you share it with someone else.
That was foreign idea because, like you said, the Soviet Union was very successful to eradicate completely all the religions, especially Judaism. So people were ignorant. They didn't know anything. They didn't have any Jewish values in their life.
Do other people agree with Menucha?
Some people kind and caring, trying to help. When we came here, my friends and my husband's relatives, they helped us a lot for 3 months and even after that.
I'm not talking about helping the family member. That's normal, of course. I'm talking about helping in the community, like here. Donate kidney to random person, random Jew that you don't know.
I do understand what she's saying because it does make sense that when you're in an oppressive situation and when you don't have the religious background, that is hard. Maybe what Leah was experiencing is more within friend groups, so there's more natural support, which doesn't take away what Menucha's saying. I think her point really is there's an education. We weren't raised this way. And therefore, even as adults, and thank God we live in America, and thank God compared to how we grew up, we're all fabulously wealthy, but it's our headspace. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on what are our barriers to having this type of love for each other?
It was depending on the region when you live. We are from Ukraine. It wasn't accustomed to help whoever is not your family. It was very seldom and rare. In Ukraine, they particularly didn't like Jews.
So you're following what Menucha said, that because life was so difficult, people really couldn't extend themselves past their own family unit.
Yes.
I am from Kishinev. Soviets came to us in 1940. What I remember from my parents, it was a lot of love to Jewish people. Let's say my dad was a little manager in a factory. If he knew that somebody applied to a job and he's a Jew, everything was done for the Jew. You know what I mean? He would do everything. First thing he had to know, Jew or not Jew. And if it was a Jew, everything would be different. His attitude would be different. It was like a network of people. And we knew if we needed something, we go to another Jew. And Jews, among Jews, it was a lot of support. I'm not saying that if somebody didn't have money, I don't remember us collecting money and helping. But as far as connections, as far as helping in different things, it was definitely anything we needed, we would seek out another Jew in that network.
And the difference you're pointing out is the Soviets only took over in 1940. So your father was raised without that Soviet oppression and influence and stripping him away of his Jewish identity.
It was the most important thing. Anywhere I would go, I would attend a party or I would start a job in the United States. The first thing from my parents, are there Jewish people there? I go to a doctor, is he Jewish? That was the first thing out of their mouths, Jewish or not Jewish.
Okay, but you're saying they had this education before the Soviets came in. They were raised that way. They were raised in this Jewish way. When the Soviets came in 1940, they were probably already adults.
Something came to mind. That happened already in the United States. I was very young. I got a phone call from a person who asking for help from me. I was very surprised about the phone call because that person wronged me. He hurt me. And he left a message on the answering machine. And I was really surprised. So I talked to my father. I said, Deity, I got this phone call from this person asking for my help. I just don't understand why would he call me after hurting me. I'm definitely not going to return his call. So my father sat me down and he said to me, he's a Jewish person in pain and in need. He knows he hurt you. So you have to imagine how he has to swallow his pride and call you, reach out for help. And my dad explained it to me, and I saw it in a different side, and I returned the call and I helped that person.
Wow.
My father loved me very much, and he was sensitive the way that person wronged me, but he still arose above it, and he advised me help.
Wow, that's a really beautiful story. He's a Jew, help him. He's in pain, help him. He's needy, help him. Wow, that's very strong. So that's the education that the Soviets stole from everybody else. Because your father got it, because it was 1940 when the Soviets took over his area. And everybody else who didn't have that education, like Menucha is saying and Miriam is saying, they stole it from your parents, from that natural way how Jews treated Jews. Wow. What's interesting, because in the Talmud, there was somebody that came from Israel, where the Jews were insanely impoverished, to Babylonia, where the Jews were much more comfortable, collecting money for the very poor people in Israel. And he went to one town in Babylonia, and he went from door to door, and nobody would give him anything. And when he finished going through this whole town, and not one Jew gave him any money, he declares, they're not Jewish. He said, that's not Jewish. He says, the nature of a Jew is to be kind and compassionate. That's not a Jew being religious. It's nothing to do with being religious. It's being Jewish. It's the nature of a Jew is to be kind and compassionate. I think you see that Jewish nature where many Jews that aren't religious at all, but they're Jewish, and they're very charitable. They're not charitable because they're following God's laws. They're charitable because that's the nature of a Jew, to be kind, to be giving. There is a culture of kindness among the Jews in America. If the culture of kindness translates into financially supporting Israel or situations like that, I think there is a culture of kindness because that is, in essence, the nature of the Jew. Mm-hmm. Now, I ran out of time. What I wanted to do was think of suggestions to overcome the challenges. So the challenges we started with, Baba said that maybe what blocks us from being so freely generous and loving with people, maybe not people across the world, but people in our backyard, is our own insecurity. And maybe we want to protect ourselves because we feel other people can hurt us emotionally. and seeing your own shortcomings in other people, which makes you more nervous with them. And compounded with what Menucha is saying, if as a child you weren't raised with the value of being there for everyone, for any Jewish person, I thought it was really beautiful how Rivka described her father, obviously representing that era, how he was raised, that it's a Jew, you're there for them. And if you're not raised that way, it's another whole level to do something that's so not natural for you. Anyone have any suggestions that come to them in terms of how to overcome these challenges?
Educational people should know that it's our genes, like from Abraham, who helped everyone get involved in the community and learn from other people.
Rachel, what were you going to say?
I agree with Menucha. One of the blockages, as I see it, some people are more sensitive, especially sensitive to sincere people. So it's hard to love somebody who you feel not sincere, not truthful person. That's hardest thing, but for me. And again, education. I want to mention one example. I came from the Soviet Union. I was more like Menucha describes. And my daughter needed a camp in summer. So Rabbi Notik and Rabbi Katz in Synagogue Free, they said she can go to the camp, but they didn't have any places for free anymore. It was already June when we came here. Give us checks for each for $30, and we will be cashing them once a month. So this is what we did. They never cashed any of them.
Wow.
So I was shocked because this is the first time I faced something like that in Trinity. Of course, when we had good jobs, we went to synagogue. And
that's really beautiful. That was the first time you saw that type of a Jew helps a Jew.
Yeah.
That's very beautiful. Beautiful value. Just as this man said, obviously when he was in Israel, nobody charged the tuition. That was the whole point. But he said when he was in New York, nobody charged for tuition or dorm. And they could have asked his aunt and uncle for money. They would have paid. Nobody charged. And when he went to Montreal, also, nobody asked his aunt and uncle, who would have paid something. They would have paid. Nobody ever asked. Not when he was in Israel, not when he was in New York, not when he was in Montreal. What I was thinking is to really educate ourselves, convince ourselves, confront ourselves with how important it is, how significant. If we can say, this is the official reason for the destruction of the Second Temple, wow, God's destroying his home over this? Adultery, murder, we understand. Those are big, bad things. People not treating each other nicely. God's destroying his home because people aren't treating each other nicely. And for all these years, it's so challenging for us to treat each other nicely and generously and warmly, to extend that family love to the family of the Jewish people. It's so important. And there's a rule. The more significant something is, the more challenging it is. On a very personal level, whatever spiritually is important for you, your reason for being in this world, we're all reincarnations, we've all been here many times. The reason why you are in this world, what your soul needs, is going to be the most challenging thing for you because it's the most important. So it's going to be the most challenging. And in general, anything significant is challenging. And if it's more significant, it's more challenging. So I think what Chava said, what Menucha said, what Miriam said, what Rachel said, when we are honest and say, yeah, God, I can give you a lot. I can give you how I dress. I can give you how I talk. I can give you my food. I can give you so many minutes of my day. But giving another person this love, I don't know. Why? Because it's so important. And therefore it's so challenging. So maybe, like Menucha saying, education, if we can educate ourselves, this is challenging because it's important. This is so important. This is so significant. And to really challenge yourself, demand from yourself. I love that story that Rivka shared with her and her father and the man that wronged her, because it was such an honest story. It's so poignant how, yeah, people can hurt us and they're still Jews and they still sometimes need us. And that's really hard, but it really shows that value. And sometimes people might not be sincere, and sometimes people might be people that could be emotionally hurtful, but this is significant. And if we really, every one of us can really commit to this. And as I'm saying, it's the nature of the Jew. You don't need an education. You don't need to be religious. It's the nature of the Jew to be kind and compassionate. That's our animal nature. So to really pull this out of ourselves, especially now, and share it with whoever, and looking at, as Manucha said, as Rachel said, looking at other examples in the world you're in now of people that do so, like Malki said, all the Chabad emissaries that dedicate their lives to helping other people, and to really inspire yourself to push a little more, even though it's not easy. Everyone who's fasting should have an easy and meaningful fast Wednesday night and Thursday, and we should see the rebuilding. We're working on the rebuilding. We should see the rebuilding.